the gilded cage of the law. The Mega-Citadel of the Galaxy Council of Species was a testament to the principle that law, like nature, abhors a vacuum. It was not built so much as it was grown. A colossal, semi-organic structure of pale, latticed metal and light-emitting flora that spiraled towards a perpetually twilight sky. Inside its halls, the air was cool and carried the scent of rain and distant bureaucracy. This was the heart of galactic civilization, a place where 1,000 species came to argue, to legislate, and to adjudicate. It was a monument to order, and like all monuments, it had a dungeon. The judicial tribunal chambers were located deep within the citadel's lower spires, a place where the natural light of the surface never reached. The room was a perfect amphitheater of cold, gray stone and polished obsidian, designed for acoustics and intimidation. At the center, on a raised dais, sat the 3 justices, their features obscured by flowing robes and hoods of deep crimson. They were the face of the council's authority, impartial and absolute. Below them, 2 opposing platforms faced each other across a wide, empty floor. On one stood the legislator, a man named Kaelen, his face a mask of weary resolve. On the other, his accuser, a man who radiated a cold, predatory calm. Kaelen was a product of the free frontier, a man who had clawed his way up from the dust of independent worlds to earn a seat in the Mega-Citadel. He was a master of rhetoric and legal precedent, his mind a finely tuned instrument of wits. He believed in the law as a shield for the weak and a framework for the strong to build upon. He was not a warrior. His battles were fought with words and logic. Today, that shield felt paper-thin. His opponent was a Necro-Splicer named Malakor. Malakor was a high-ranking member of the Ascendant Cult, a faction that viewed the Galaxy Council's sterile order as an affront to the glorious, chaotic potential of life. His very presence was an affront to the Citadel's sensibilities. His skin was a pale, almost translucent canvas, upon which dark, vein-like tattoos of biocircuitry pulsed with a faint, sickly green light. He moved with a liquid grace, his eyes, 2 black, depthless pools, fixed on Kaelen with an unnerving, analytical hunger. He was not here to argue, he was here to dissect. "The charge," the central justice intoned, their voice a resonant, genderless boom that filled the chamber, "is high treason against the Galaxy Council of Species. The accused, Legislator Kaelen, is alleged to have authored and disseminated the Frontier Mandate, a seditious document calling for the secession of all free frontier worlds from council jurisdiction. How do you plead?" Kaelen stepped forward, his voice steady despite the cold knot of dread in his stomach. "I plead not guilty, your honors. The document in question is a political treatise, a philosophical argument for greater autonomy, not a call to armed rebellion. The right to dissent is enshrined in the council's own founding charter." Malakor glided forward, a faint, reptilian smile playing on his lips. "A charming defense, legislator, but semantics cannot hide intent. The Frontier Mandate is not a letter to the editor. It is a blueprint for insurrection. Its language is deliberately inflammatory, its conclusions a direct incitement to treason. You did not simply write words, you planted a seed of chaos. You sought to unravel the very fabric of galactic society." "The fabric is frayed, Counselor," Kaelen retorted, his wits sharpening to a fine point. "My worlds are dying. Our resources are stripped by corporate interests protected by this very council. Our people are conscripted to fight in wars they do not understand. The mandate is not a seed of chaos. It is a cry for help from a million suffocating voices. A cry for help that conveniently aligns with the syndicate's black market ambitions and the Ascendant Cult's desire for a weakened central authority." Malakor countered smoothly. "Your cry for help is a signal to the vultures. You claim to be a man of the people, yet you consort with pirates and fanatics." "Lies," Kaelen shot back. "You present no proof, only insinuation. You twist my words to fit your narrative of fear." "Proof?" Malakor's smile widened. He raised a hand, and a shimmering holographic image appeared in the space between the platforms. It was a recording, taken from a hidden camera. It showed Kaelen sitting in a dimly lit cantina, speaking with a known syndicate enforcer. The audio was clear. Kaelen was heard saying, "Sometimes to build a new house, you must first burn the old one to the ground." The chamber went silent. The justices leaned forward slightly. Kaelen felt the blood drain from his face. The meeting was real, but the context was everything. He had been trying to get the enforcer to back off, to stop preying on a remote frontier settlement. He was using the man's own violent metaphors against him. But the recording, isolated and edited, was damning. It was a masterstroke of character assassination. "The evidence is compelling," the Central Justice stated. "However, the tribunal requires more than circumstantial recordings. We will recess for one cycle. In that time, you will both be given the opportunity to present a single, decisive piece of evidence. Legislator, you may call one character witness. Counselor Malakor, you may do the same. Choose wisely. The future of your worlds and your own life hangs in the balance." The justices rose and retreated through a hidden panel. The heavy stone doors of the chamber began to close. Kaelen stood frozen, the weight of the holographic lie crushing him. He had been outmaneuvered, trapped in a web of his own making. He looked at Malakor, who gave him a slow, deliberate nod as if to say checkmate. Chapter 2: The Echoes of the Past. The recess chamber was a small, sterile room, a stark contrast to the grandeur of the tribunal hall. It contained only a simple table, 2 chairs, and a single, high window that looked out not onto the sky, but onto the pulsing, bioluminescent inner workings of the Citadel itself. Kaelen sat alone, his head in his hands. The holographic recording played on a loop in his mind, a relentless, damning soundtrack to his downfall. He had one chance, one witness. Who could possibly believe him over the cold, hard truth of that recording? He needed someone who could speak to his character, to his lifelong dedication to the principles of peace and order, not to the edited snippet of a desperate conversation. He needed someone from the frontier, someone whose integrity was beyond question. An image came to him, unbidden. A face weathered by 1,000 suns and 100 battles, eyes that held the wisdom of the ages and the fire of a warrior. Elder Warrior Nero. He was a living legend among the frontier worlds, a man who had fought the Council's enemies and the frontier's bandits with equal valor. If Nero spoke for him, the justices might listen. He submitted the request through the chamber's console, his fingers trembling slightly. The request was approved. Moments later, the door slid open, and Elder Warrior Nero entered. He was shorter than Kaelen remembered, his frame lean and wiry beneath his simple, homespun tunic. His face was a roadmap of old scars, and his hair was the color of spun silver. But it was his eyes that commanded the room. They were a piercing, intelligent gray, and they missed nothing. "Legislator," Nero said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "You look like a man who's seen a ghost." "I have, Elder," Kaelen replied, standing and gesturing to the chair. "A ghost of my own poor judgment. They have a recording, Nero. It makes me sound like a revolutionary firebrand." Nero sat, his movements economical and precise. "I know. I have seen the evidence, files the Council has made public. It is effective." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "But I also know you, Kaelen. I remember the boy who convinced 2 warring clans to share a watering hole by reciting their shared histories. I remember the young man who stood before the Council's tax collectors and argued for 3 days straight that a drought was not a profit loss, but a community tragedy. You are a builder, not a burner. So tell me the truth of that recording." Kaelen did, laying out the entire story of the meeting with the syndicate enforcer, the desperation of the settlement, and his ill-fated attempt to use logic on a man who only understood violence. As he spoke, Nero listened intently, his expression unreadable. When Kaelen finished, Nero was silent for a long moment. "The truth is a flimsy shield against a well-forged lie," he finally said. "But it is the only shield we have. I will speak for you. I will tell them of the boy, the young man, and the legislator I know. I will give them the context they seek." "Thank you, Elder," Kaelen said, a wave of relief washing over him. I am in your debt." Meanwhile, in an identical chamber on the other side of the tribunal hall, Malakor was preparing his own witness. He did not need a character witness. He needed a weapon. He had already forged the lie. Now he needed to poison the well. He did not summon a person. He summoned a memory. A young, terrified clerk from the council's own archives was brought before him, trembling under Malakor's unblinking gaze. "You will testify," Malakor said, his voice a soft, hypnotic whisper. "You will tell the justices that you personally filed the legislators' travel itineraries. You will tell them that on the date in question, he was not in the frontier, but was scheduled for a secret meeting on a syndicate-controlled moon. You have seen the official logs. You know this to be true." The clerk shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. But the logs are wrong. There was a data entry error. I corrected it the next day. The legislator was in the frontier, just as he says." Malakor leaned forward, the biocircuitry on his face glowing brighter. The air in the room grew thick, heavy. The clerk's eyes widened in terror. "You are mistaken," Malakor said, his voice no longer a whisper, but a resonant command that seemed to vibrate directly in the man's skull. "You remember the error. You remember correcting it. But you also remember the original, false entry. It is still there, a ghost in the system. A ghost you will bring forth. Your memory is flawed. Your loyalty is to the truth. And the truth is what I tell you it is." He reached out and placed a single, long finger on the clerk's forehead. The clerk convulsed, a gasp escaping his lips. His eyes went blank for a second, then refocused, filled with a new, unwavering certainty. He was a puppet, his mind rewritten, his memory a carefully constructed fiction. "You will testify," Malakor repeated, withdrawing his finger. "And you will be believed." The clerk nodded, his face slack, his eyes vacant. He was now the perfect weapon, a living lie that could not be broken, because the victim himself believed it to be the truth. Malakor had not just brought evidence, he had brought a contagion of doubt. Chapter 3: The Trial of Wills. The heavy stone doors of the tribunal chamber swung open again, revealing the unchanged, imposing scene. The justices resumed their seats, their crimson robes a splash of color in the monochrome room. Kaelen felt a renewed sense of hope, bolstered by Nero's calm presence beside him. Across the floor, Malakor stood with his witness, the young clerk, who now looked not terrified but resolute. "The tribunal will reconvene," the central justice announced. "Legislator Kaelen, you may present your witness." Kaelen stepped forward. "Your honors, I call Elder Warrior Nero of the Kaelen Prime Settlement. He has known me my entire life. He will speak to my character, and to the true nature of my intentions regarding the frontier mandate." Nero approached the dais, his back straight, his gaze respectful. He spoke not with the flowery language of a politician, but with the simple, powerful cadence of a storyteller. He recounted the tale Kaelen had told him, painting a picture of a man whose life's work had been to mend, not to break. He spoke of Kaelen's tireless efforts to mediate disputes, his unwavering belief in dialogue over force, and his profound love for his people. He was compelling, authentic, and his words carried the weight of a lifetime of integrity. The legislator's words, when taken from their proper context, can be made to sound like anything, Nero concluded, his voice echoing in the silent chamber. But a lifetime of deeds cannot be so easily distorted. I have stood with this man through famine and war. I tell you, he is no traitor. He is a patriot to his people, and a believer in the ideals this council claims to uphold. When he finished, a palpable sense of agreement rippled through the chamber. Even the justices seemed to lean forward, their inscrutable focus softening almost imperceptibly. Kaelen allowed himself a small, hopeful smile. It was working. Then the central justice turned their gaze to Malakor. "Counselor Malakor, your witness." Malakor glided forward, a predator sensing a shift in the tide. "Your honors, I do not wish to debate character. Character is subjective. I wish to deal in facts. I call Senior Archive Clerk Elms." The clerk Elms stepped forward, his face a mask of earnest conviction. "Counselor Malakor," the central justice prompted, "what is the purpose of this testimony?" To demonstrate a pattern of deception, Your Honors, Malakor said smoothly. The legislator claims he was in the frontier, tending to his people on the date of the recording. But the council's own official travel logs tell a different story. Clerk Elms, please tell the tribunal what you have told me. Elms took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the justices. On the date in question, I personally processed the initial travel itinerary for Legislator Kaelen. The destination was not a frontier world, but Xylo's trading post, a location known to be a haven for syndicate operatives. The purpose of the trip was listed as unspecified diplomatic relations. I remember it clearly because it seemed unusual at the time. Kaelen felt a jolt of ice in his veins. He stared at the clerk, dumbfounded. The man was lying, but he was doing it with such conviction, such unshakable certainty, that it was terrifying. He looked like a man telling the absolute truth. "This is impossible," Kaelen exclaimed, stepping forward. "I have never been to Xylo's on that date. Your Honors, this is a fabrication. The clerk is mistaken." "Am I?" Elm said, turning to face Kaelen, his eyes wide with a feigned, hurt innocence. "Legislator, perhaps your memory is failing. I have the data chip with the original entry right here." He held up a small, glowing chip. "It was never erased, only superseded, but the original record remains." Malakor smiled. "Your Honors, we have a recording of the legislator speaking the language of treason. We have a witness placing him at a known syndicate hub at the same time. We have his own seditious document as evidence. The pattern is clear. The legislator's character witness speaks of a lifetime of deeds. But what is a lifetime of deeds against a mountain of hard, factual data? The legislator is not just a traitor. He is a cunning and deceptive one, who has spent years building a false reputation to conceal his true allegiances. The damage was done. Nero's heartfelt testimony, which had seemed so powerful moments before, now felt like a desperate, emotional plea in the face of cold, hard facts. The clerk's lie was a virus that had infected the proceedings. Kaelen could see it in the posture of the justices, the subtle shift back to rigid, unforgiving scrutiny. He had been outflanked. He had brought a shield of honor to a knife fight, and Malakor had just slipped a poisoned blade between his ribs. Chapter 4: The Verdict of the Void. The silence that fell over the tribunal chamber was heavier than a neutron star. Kaelen stood frozen, the clerk's words echoing in the vast stone space. They were a perfect counterpoint to the holographic recording, a 1-2 punch of fabricated reality. He had a witness who spoke of his soul. Malakor had a witness who spoke of his schedule. In the cold, analytical world of the council, the schedule was winning. He looked at Nero, whose weathered face was a mask of grim disbelief. The old warrior's testimony had been a masterpiece of truth, but it was a masterpiece painted in water, destined to fade against Malakor's oil and canvas of lies. He looked at the clerk, Elms, who stood with his head held high, a man utterly convinced of his own falsehood, a living monument to the Necro-Splicer's vile craft. And he looked at Malakor, who stood with his hands clasped loosely, the picture of serene confidence. He had won. He had not just defeated Kaelen. He had perverted the very concept of truth, turning the tribunal into a theater of the absurd. "The evidence has been presented," the central justice's voice boomed, shattering the silence. "The tribunal will now deliberate." The justices did not leave the room. They simply conferred, their heads bowed together, their hoods hiding their faces. The deliberation was short, brutally short. It was clear they had already made up their minds. Kaelen's mind raced, desperately searching for an angle, a loophole, anything. He had one last chance to speak. But what could he say? The clerk is lying because the other guy is a psychic who brainwashed him. It sounded insane. It was the defense of a madman. He had to attack the lie itself, not the liar. He had to use his wits, not to defend himself, but to dissect the opposition's case. "Your Honors," Kaelen said, his voice cutting through the quiet. He stepped forward, his fear replaced by a cold, clear focus. "A moment. Before you render your verdict, I wish to address the facts presented by the counselor." The central justice raised a hand. The time for testimony is over, legislator. With respect, your honors, this is not testimony. It is logic, Kaelen pressed on, his voice gaining strength. Counselor Malakor has presented a compelling narrative. A recording, a travel log, a seditious document. It all ties together perfectly. Too perfectly. He turned to face Malakor directly. You are a meticulous man, counselor. A master of the grand design. But in your meticulousness, you have made a critical error. You have over-engineered your lie. He held up his hands, ticking off points on his fingers. You present a recording of me speaking in metaphors. You present a clerk who testifies to a travel plan. And you present my own document. But you forget one thing. You forget the why. If I were a traitor, plotting a rebellion, why would I write a public manifesto announcing my intentions? Why would I meet a syndicate enforcer in a public cantina, knowing I might be seen? Why would I leave a digital trail, however well hidden, in the council's own archives? He paused, letting the questions hang in the air. A real traitor operates in the shadows. He uses coded channels, not public treatises. He is subtle, not theatrical. The case you have built is not the profile of a cunning revolutionary. It is the profile of a man being framed by a master propagandist. You have not presented evidence of my guilt. You have presented evidence of your own ingenuity in manufacturing it. The very perfection of your narrative is its greatest flaw. He looked back at the justices. The clerk's memory is a ghost in the system, he said. He is right. But the ghost is not in the data chip. The ghost is in the man. The counselor is a Necro-Splicer. His very craft is the manipulation of flesh and mind. He has not presented a witness. He has presented a victim, a man whose own mind has been rewritten to serve this narrative. The facts are a lie. The witness is a weapon. And the true crime being committed in this room is not treason, but the perversion of this very tribunal. It was a gamble, a desperate leap of faith. He was abandoning his own defense to launch a counteraccusation, one based on nothing but his own analysis and the opponent's known abilities. For a long moment, the chamber was utterly still. The justices did not move. Malakor's serene expression finally cracked, a flicker of something anger, surprise in his depthless eyes. Then the central justice spoke, their voice resonating with a new, more thoughtful tone. The legislator raises a compelling point. The narrative is neat, tidy. The nature of the Ascendant Cult is well documented. We will recess for one final cycle. The witness, Clerk Elms, will be remanded for a deep psych evaluation. Counselor Malakor, you will remain under guard. The tribunal requires time to consider the nature of evidence itself. The justices rose and left, the stone doors closing behind them. Guards moved to flank a suddenly pale-looking Malakor. Kaelen stood, his heart pounding, his legs feeling like they might give out. He had thrown his final, desperate punch, and for a moment it seemed to have landed. He had not won, not yet, but he had pulled the game back from the brink, turning a checkmate into a stalemate. He had faced the void and, by questioning its very existence, had forced it to question itself. The verdict was still to come,